going to kick off things this morning, and I'm going to be joined for a conversation with three leaders from our board of directors. I'm joined on stage by CCSSO past president and Alabama Superintendent Eric Mackey, CCSSO president-elect and Connecticut Commissioner Charlene Russell Tucker, and CCSSO board member and Wisconsin Superintendent of Public Instruction, Jill Underley. Please join me in welcoming them. Well, good morning to all of you, and thank you for being here with us. We're going to kick off this wonderful day of highlighting state leadership, talking about some of the ways in which you all are working in your state. So, Charlene, I'm going to start with you this morning. You've talked a lot about a systems approach and how in Connecticut that's been really important to not just do one thing, but to have a series of things and to do them well and to do them consistently together. So talk about your vision for the systems approach you have in Connecticut.
So thank you, Carissa, and thank you to all of you for joining. And boy, did I wish there was just one thing that we were able to do, but as you mentioned, that is certainly not the case. We need to make sure that our systems are coordinated and that they're aligned, and that also our expectations are also aligned. So in Connecticut, we have a State Board of Education plan. Every student prepared for learning life and work beyond school. So that is the State Board of Education's plan. And there are 4 strategic priorities in that plan. It is equitable access to education, safe and healthy learning environments, high quality instruction, and multiple career pathway options for our students. And so at the board level, then at the department level, we take those 4 big strategic priorities and figure out what our focus areas are that we need to make sure that it's aligned to accomplish that. And so, for example, I won't share all the focus areas with you, but we have expanded our educator workforce, one of them. Ensuring students are present and engaged every day is another. Promoting school, family, community partnerships, that's another one. And so when you think about it, for a concrete example, if we're going to do work to make sure we're addressing literacy, for example, you recognize that in order to do that, well, maybe we need to make sure we have high-quality educators in that space. We need to make sure, oh, by the way, foundational students are present and engaged so they can benefit from instruction. We've got to make sure that we have high-quality instructional materials and we're providing training, not only to our educators, but to our leaders. So the bottom line is all of that must come together. So it's not a one and done, but there must be coherence. So it's not just a list of things you're doing. They've got to be aligned. Resources must be aligned with that. And so that's really important that we're doing that work. And that, right, what is the opposite of having a coherent system, right, is incoherence and things that's just a list of things to do, and we can't do that and get the outcomes that we're getting. And so it's really important, and we also have to think about, in delivering on those promises that we're making, what are those partnerships that are really important to really help to drive that as well? And so in our role as commissioner, each year we have a theme in education to help to drive action and to spur action. Unlocking lifelong potential is this year's theme, just to get people energized so that we can accomplish all the goals. But as you said, it's not a one and done. Systems must be aligned. Then the agency staff must be aligned, and our partners must be aligned around getting the work done as well.
Yeah, and one of the ways in which you've really doubled down on that is having a strong focus on return on investment and knowing where you're seeing results for all of those things and being really clear about that. Can you talk about the partnerships you have with your institutions and how you're doing that measurement of what you're being successful at?
So, Carissa, thank you. I think for all of us, it's important to answer the great question: so what? And we started answering that question back in the pandemic. We don't want to go back there. But we had $1 billion. And I was very committed to my governor to say, after we've invested those, I should be able to answer the question, so what? Right? What did you do with $1 billion? And so we had a partnership with our higher ed institution and deploy a research collaborative. Imagine our higher ed institutions with all these researchers really just looking for connection. And so we've aligned them around our research collaborative that allows us to sit with our major investments and to be able to have it evaluated and to let us know what's the return on investment. And in order to, really the end result of that is right now that we've been able to answer that question with our legislature with our governor's office to say, so you invested in high dosage tutoring, so what? We're able to show the return on that investment. We have the learner engagement and attendance program. What are you seeing there? And so we've been able, the science of reading and the work that you're doing, so we've been able to answer that question, so what? And the great news with that in the governor's budget, we now have line items being proposed to carry those programs forward. High dosage tutoring, literacy coaches, all of that because we're able to answer the question, so what?
Yeah, I mean, you started with funding that research collaborative in the during ESSER dollars, right? And then found it to be so impactful that it's now a line item for you to continue to do the return on investment.
Absolutely.
So, Jill, I'm going to come to you. And in Wisconsin, your strategic plan is innovative education, and a focus on modernizing the learning environment to better meet today's learner. What innovations are you working on in Wisconsin to make that happen?
Well, thank you so much for that question, and good morning, everybody. So when I took office in 2021, we were coming out of, well, it was really the first year of after the pandemic had happened, and what we realized was that we didn't really have a plan. There was no focus, and so we went around the state and we did listening sessions because we were going to develop a strategic plan, and we went to every corner of Wisconsin, put thousands of miles on our cars, in order to do so. And what came out of that was that parents wanted more innovation in education. They didn't want their schools to look like they were when they were in school. They said it's the 21st century. It shouldn't look like 1900s in school. And so innovation in education looked like a couple different things. Of course, there was the science of reading happening, so we were developing a reading plan, and we enacted that policy in cooperation with the legislature. And then we also began developing our math plan in Wisconsin. But we also, and we were a little bit behind this as a whole, like as a state, but a lot of our school districts had been implementing Portrait of a Graduate and what they wanted their learners to look like going into the century ahead. And so we started embracing that as well. But what came out of our strategic plan was very similar to what Charlene was talking about as well, is that we needed to be more innovative. So we started focusing on modernizing the DPI, and that's the Department of Public Instruction. And we reorganized our agency to really focus on the key things that came out of those listening sessions around innovation. So teacher recruitment and retention, mental health, and we also, like I said, reorganized at the agency so that we can focus on those priorities.
And let's dig in just a little bit. What most excites you about the potential for what you've rolled out the strategic plan, you've been working on it. What most excites you about what's coming up?
That kids are excited, that the students want to learn. Like we've got these partnerships with different organizations, but including higher education. But the idea that education shouldn't just be, K-12. It starts at birth. And so partnering with early childhood and focusing on early childhood education, literacy and math, making sure that students are able to excel in reading and math throughout their K-12 career, and then carrying that forward into college or career. And so working with our 2-year colleges, working with our 4-year colleges, working with pathways, with different partners in industry, so that everybody's prepared. And what we've seen results. We have some of the highest graduation rates in the country. We have the highest graduation rate in Wisconsin history. And I do feel that when we focus on the whole child, and that includes mental health, making sure that they have everything they need, that they feel they belong in their school, they want to be in school. And so we were able to buck the trends when it came to truancy.
Thank you for that. Eric, I'm gonna come to you. So Alabama has had some enviable growth in student performance, particularly in math. And throughout today, we're going to highlight some resources that are going to be out there. We want to highlight the CCSSO published A Nation of Problem Solvers, how state leaders can help every student achieve in math in 2024 as one of the highlights of this. And this time last year, we hosted a public summit highlighting the ways in which states were taking to improve math. And we were pleased to feature Alabama during that time. And you're back a year later. So we'd love to hear how that improvement is going and how math is going in Alabama.
Well,
And maybe
glad to-
talk about how you got there to begin
Yeah, I'm
with.
glad to keep talking about mathematics, and I know we all are. It's a struggle for the whole country. Obviously, we know that we've spent so much time on literacy, which is important. We all know that and believe that every child needs to be able to read at a high level. But in many ways, we think math got left behind in that, and so we really probably 2018, 19 began to dig in on math. I talked a little bit about that, more about it last year, but I'll just give that brief history again. We were at the very bottom, and we had been at the very bottom on the NAEP results in math for 50 years. We had always ended up right at the bottom, and so we thought we really had to think about how we're doing this and what we should do differently. So we started by rewriting our standards, and then developing a new assessment, new formative assessments to go with our summative assessment. So getting kind of those basics in place. And then the hard part, retraining our teachers. So we're in a multi-year stage. We're now 2 years away from having a math coach in every elementary school funded by the state. When it's all said and done, it'll be a $100 million a year commitment by the state legislature to fully reteach teachers, elementary teachers on mathematics, how to teach mathematics. I always say it's not that our teachers can't do math. It's a whole different thing to do math and teach math, just like it's a whole different thing to read or be able to teach reading. So we had to teach them how to teach math again and get coaches in all of those schools. Our legislature came along then and passed the Alabama Numeracy Act about 4 years into this, which is what gave us the money to hire all the coaches and to really make other systemic changes. Like now we're working with higher ed to rebuild all of our math pathways in higher education, and a new certification test and those kind of things still are rolling out. So we feel good about it. It is going well. Last year, since we were last here, we got our state results, and we showed growth in every grade on mathematics. And so we felt really good about that.
Congratulations. That is incredible.
We're
Yes.
trying. So, that's our only year-to-year measure is our state test. And then, of course, everybody in the room is waiting in bated breath for the NAEP results that'll come out about a year from now, less than a year from now. So what we want is to have predictive assessments, obviously. We all want that, so that our formative tests tell us what the summative is going to tell us, which tells us what NAEP's going to tell us. But we all know we never know that for sure. Sometimes the formative data tell us, hey, things are going well, and then that ends up that they're not as good, or the opposite. So we feel good about the implementation where we are now. I think it is something that we all have to continue to work on, because we as a country have a lot of work to do on mathematics. And the biggest problem continues to be that people don't believe they can do math. They believe there are math people, and those are other people. There are a few statisticians here in the room. They are the math people. But most people see themselves as math's just not my thing, and that, of course, works against us when we're trying to teach every child they can be proficient at math.
Yeah, I want to double down on something that has been part of your success. You were talking about starting in 2018, and then passing the Numeracy Act, and then the legislature brought some money, and in 2 years you'll have all the teachers there. Like, this has been a long road. It has not been turn it around in a couple of years. Talk to us about, in 2 years you're going to have more teachers. You're going to have maybe a predictive assessment. What do we see 5 years from now? And also your advice about how do you stay the course on something so you can actually see results down the road?
Yeah, I think that's hard to stay the course. I think it's hard for any political body to stay the course of something over multiple political generations, let's say. So you go through multiple elections, you have changes at the top, you have changes in the legislature, and you have to stay the course on something. I frankly think that's one of our problems in education. Like, we're all trying to see the long goal, and we're working with bodies that see short-term wins. So one of the things is to get some short-term wins. We were fortunate. I think that we were able to get some short-term wins. Within a couple of years, we were able to show some significant growth, and we feel pretty good about that. We're nowhere close to where we want to be. But as we show growth along the way, we're able to get people to buy in. And then one of the things we've done is get people to buy in across the board. with our Numeracy Act and with our Literacy Act before that, they were both passed with essentially unanimous bipartisan support. So getting everybody to believe that they are a part of the solution is a way to maintain that momentum.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit, because we're going to talk about how, like, these efforts cannot be singular. They have to be integrated. They have to be a part of a vision, and you have to have people along for the ride with you, right? And so you were able to pass the Numeracy Act with a bipartisan effort. You've stayed the course maintaining this. Your advice about, how do you keep agreement across the aisle to see these things through?
Yeah, I think we have to bring everybody back to the table over and over again. I know a lot of us, like whether it's a blue state or a red state, many of us now have supermajorities in our legislature, and we have a supermajority. So you could pass things without the minority, but that will always backfire, because everybody has to believe they're a part of the solution. And so we work really hard to make sure that we bring everybody from the Speaker of the House to the minority leadership on board, and that they are constantly meeting with us, hearing from our state board members, and hearing from their local superintendents and others, especially superintendents, though, that everybody's on board. And then another thing I think is important for all of us is to remember that just because somebody has a D or an R beside their name doesn't mean they all think the same. So what we find is, even among the Republicans and the Democrats, just because you get the leader on board doesn't mean you have everybody on board, because they're not all thinking exactly the same. And so, again, it's visiting with lots of people, making sure the people in their district understand what we're trying to do, so when they go back home, they hear the same message, and they feel like they're a part of the solution. And I don't think we ever completely win that battle. Like, we are always constantly reaching out to people to make sure they realize they're a valuable part of the solution.
Yeah, it's the continuity past any one leader in any given body to make sure that people feel like they are a part of the solution, right? So, Jill, you're an elected chief, and you work with an independently elected governor and legislature to move forward your objectives. How do you find common ground and keep everybody moving towards student outcomes in Wisconsin?
That's such a great question. And as you said, Carissa, I am elected, but I'm unique in the way that my office is nonpartisan, and I don't have a state school board. And so what I've learned, even as a parent or when I was a superintendent in a school district, is that we all want the same things. Like, Eric said, it doesn't matter if you have a D or an R behind your name. In public education, in general, I find that we all want the same things. We want kids who are going to be great students, right? We want them to be healthy, and we want them to be happy. We want them to be able to read and understand math and be successful. We want teachers who are knowledgeable and passionate about their subject, who care for kids. And we want communities that are healthy and thriving as well. And I think we can all agree we all want that. And so our approach has been, when we work with the legislature, to just have that common ground, going in, understanding that we do have a lot in common. Yes, there are going to be some finer things maybe in the details that we do disagree on. But at the end of the day, what I find is being independently elected, not being appointed by a governor or a political party or having that connection, is that I am directly accountable to the voters in Wisconsin. And that's pretty powerful when you think about it, too, because then you don't have to filter anything through a state school board. It's like policy and initiatives. I mean, it's just that direct communication. And so we've been very successful, I'd say, just especially when it comes to like our Literacy Act and the conversations that we've had around math and some other issues as well in our school districts. But because I am directly accountable to the voters in Wisconsin, I feel it's helpful.
Thank you for that. Charlene, we're going to move to like the relationship with your fellow state chiefs, which we've just spent the last couple of days together. It seems like a week, but we've spent the last couple of days together. And we spent a lot of time talking about common goals. It's one of the things that as an organization we focus on. Can you share some examples of the time state leaders have come together for a common goal around literacy, math, any of these kinds of things that we're trying to achieve together, and get there in a different way, but how they come to common agreement?
So, great question, and I'll go back to what my colleagues were saying here about being able to lead through, Maxwell said, leading through uncertainty and remaining focused. And that is really important for all of us. But this body of state chiefs and senior leaders, this is a powerful space that we're in to learn from each other. And CCSSO leading through convening all of us, whether here or our monthly calls with chiefs, where we can try out and hear not only what the successes are, but what things didn't actually go well. I've called on chiefs specifically, we're talking about rate setting, for example, in special education, and that colleague in this room that says, let me tell you what not to do. Where we had some challenges, and so going forward, that's an example of, in my own context, what it is that I need to avoid. And, policy issues. We've been looking at cell phone, right? Who isn't looking at that? And I was able to call Eric the evening before I testified in front of the Ed Committee to get some concrete examples about a year of implementation, what does it look like? And I brought that into the testimony that I have. I didn't say the state, but I talk about my fellow chief. And so the convening power of CCSSO is really important, and I hope we all value being in this space just to talk with each other. So that's an area. The issue of math or literacy, again, always I say to my team, let's benchmark this against what our other states are doing, because it allows us not only to have the conversations with our governor's office or the legislature about this is how it's worked. My governor will say, who else is doing this? Right? And it allows us to come back and talk about it and that work together. So this is a great, is this my plug for, but really not just words and not, I'm a member of the board and president-elect, so that's really important. But it really is about being able to find that common ground even amongst yourself and colleagues. And yes, we may have different political affiliations and we may be navigating some different aspects of the work, but what we do, we find common ground because it's all about what are we doing for our students and how are we building as education leaders a system that our students can thrive. And so those are just really quick examples of policy, the convening, the calling each other, it's necessary. It was a late call too in the evening when Eric picked up. But this great relationship that we build, that we're able to go forward and assist each other. And I'll say one other thing. We talked about navigating in our states and the different political parties, sharing information and make it user-friendly to individuals. We had schools of distinction, and I sent out to every legislator, here are the schools of distinction in your community, in your constituents. Pick up the phone and call and say thank you to your leaders. So you make it really relevant to where they are and what they do, an easy way to find some common ground.
Thank you for that, Charlene. And I'll just piggyback on that with a couple of the initiatives that CCSSO has worked on. When we look at the nation of readers, we know that all 50 states, DC, and a couple of the territories have laws or policies. They don't all look the same, but they all have the same goal of making sure that kids can read and have some kind of policy around that. Our high quality instructional materials that we work on, 16 different states, all have a different approach, but it's about increasing high quality instructional materials in the classroom and teaching teachers how to use those better. So there's a lot of ways to get to the end goal, and I think that's one of the things that we work on. I'm going to give each of you an opportunity just to close us out with some final thoughts about, the coherence we talked about, what the future holds for these initiatives, and the way in which you think we should approach that as we go into talking about the specificity. So, Jill, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, so I feel that, when it comes to innovation in education, and we're learning from our school districts and the things that they're doing that are just so incredible every day, and we encourage them to tell their story. I mean, we want to know what they're doing they're having great success with, and sharing that so that we can help other school districts scale those up. But just to go back to the fact that public education is a strong tradition in Wisconsin. Even when we were a territory before statehood, it was baked into how the territory was designed. You know, in many places across the Midwest, it was the same. And so we've had that foundation of strong public funding for public schools. Communities love their schools, but also for public libraries as well. And so just learning from them and being able to share with others.
Charlene, I'm going to come to you.
You know, it's about our why, and I would encourage folks to always think about and keep that as a focus. For me, the 497,764 students, really, I keep that front and center. And I ask my constituents, my educators and others, what's your why? And to know that number as well. And it's not just a matter of trying to remember a number, but it means that every single one of them mattered, right? And that is the work that we do. And it's really important that we keep that front and center for everything. And so what is your why? Use that as your North Star every single day when it gets challenging, that you go back to that. And we continue to do that. And knowing that we can get there, right, we just need to remain focused.
Absolutely. Eric.
You know, I think as state chiefs, one of the things I've learned is that we're coalition builders. Like, we all have a vision for what we want, or we wouldn't be after these jobs, whether we're elected or appointed. But then we find out that we can't do any of what we want to do. We can't accomplish any of our vision unless we build coalitions. And those are coalitions with governors, with legislators, with state boards, local boards, superintendents. So I think the main thing we have to continue to think about is, how do we build a coalition around our vision and let other people, you know, bring their vision to the table too, because there are going to be things that people see, insights that I don't have. So how do we create a collective vision? You can still own it, can still be you that's driving the train, but we've got to bring a lot of people on. When we look around the back of that train, to use that analogy, we've got to make sure there are lots of cars and they're all full of people. And then the other thing I think is we all need to share with one another, and that's already been said by Jill and Charlene, but I can tell you that I've learned so much from other state chiefs, and I have not found any problem that I have encountered that another chief hasn't already worked their way through. And so I would say, especially to our newer chiefs, continue to reach out to people. Anytime if you're on the East Coast, you can call me late, because it's not as late as you think. But, you know, it's the reaching out to people the night before a hearing. I've done that too. Like, I've heard that this is going on in your state. I need some advice. I need some input. And we're all there for one another. So not only are we building coalitions in our state, I think we're building coalitions together to raise education for the whole country. We all have the same goal. We're going to have different ways of getting at it. That is a part of what, you know, federalism's about. Everybody does it a little differently, but we can get there all together. And I think we're doing that as a group, and I think we've been really good. I'm going to close with this, about not letting partisanship that tears the rest of this country apart, and sometimes our Congress. It doesn't tear state chiefs apart. We come into this room, I feel bipartisanship. I don't feel partisanship ever, and I hope we can continue to keep that as a real ethic for state chiefs.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric. So that's a great segue to point out that we're going to learn from state chiefs and some of our partners about the research. We're going to get to talk about successes in mathematics policies, then literacy, high quality instructional materials. And I'm so looking forward to learning all about these highlights today. So please join me in thanking this panel.